The prime rib had been in the oven since 7 in the morning. I know that because I'd set my alarm for 6:45, crept out of bed in the dark while my husband was still asleep, and started seasoning a 12-pound roast by the light above the stove. By the time Landon came downstairs at 9 in his robe, poured himself a coffee without saying good morning, and padded off to check football scores on his phone, I had already made the au jus from scratch, par-roasted the fingerling potatoes, and started the second batch of my grandmother's dinner rolls. He walked past the kitchen like I wasn't there. That was Christmas Eve. 3 years of Christmas Eves, and they had all looked more or less the same. I used to be a senior project manager at a tech consulting firm downtown. Not some small shop. I mean a firm with Fortune 500 clients, with a team of 12 under me, with a salary that paid my half of the mortgage without blinking. I was good at it. I was genuinely, specifically, measurably good at managing complex things and impossible people and 16 spinning plates at once. And then I married Landon, and his mother, Lorraine, made it clear within the first year that a woman in my position, meaning her son's wife, didn't need to be somewhere else all day, that it reflected poorly on him, that the home was suffering. The home. Our 2-bedroom condo in the Windermere neighborhood of Seattle that I was equally on the mortgage for, that home. I'd told myself I made the choice freely. I said it enough times that I almost believed it. The truth is that Landon asked me to resign. He called it stepping back exactly 11 times in 14 months before I finally did. He framed it as an investment in us, in our future, in the family we were going to build. He said it with such certainty, such warmth, that I convinced myself he was right. 2 years later, we had no kids. We had a pristine condo that I maintained like a museum. We had his family for every major holiday, and I cooked every meal for every one of them. There were 11 people coming to dinner on Christmas Eve. Landon's parents, Lorraine and Raymond, his brother Nate and Nate's girlfriend, his sister Kendall, her husband, and their 2 kids under 5. An uncle who drank steadily from 3 o'clock onward and never remembered my name, and Landon's college friend, whose name I won't bother with because he barely spoke to me. I had been preparing for 3 days. The prime rib, the rolls, a wild mushroom Wellington for Kendall, who had announced she was vegetarian 6 days before the dinner, roasted carrots, roasted Brussels sprouts, a green bean casserole made entirely from scratch because Lorraine had once said the canned soup version tasted like institutional cooking, a chestnut stuffing, 2 pies, a Yule log cake. The kitchen was mine and mine alone. That was the deal, unspoken. I kept the house and the kitchen and the calendar and the social obligations and the Christmas cards list and the family group chat, and in exchange, I got to live in this beautiful apartment that I was slowly disappearing inside of. Lorraine arrived first, as she always did, to supervise. She walked through the kitchen without taking off her coat, lifted the lid on the au jus, replaced it without comment, and then said from the doorway, "Did you use the same prime rib source as last year? Because last year's was a little gray in the center." I was basting. I didn't turn around. Dry-aged from the same butcher, rested properly this time. That sound. I had come to understand that sound meant she had already decided to be disappointed. Raymond at least gave me a nod when he hung up his coat. He was a quiet man who spent most of family gatherings, looking faintly apologetic, like a man who had checked out of a hotel years ago, but somehow kept finding himself back in the lobby. Nate and his girlfriend arrived loud and half an hour late. Kendall's kids immediately destroyed the coffee table arrangement I'd spent 40 minutes on. And Landon, my husband, the man I had reorganized my entire professional life around, came down from his home office at 5:15, showered and changed into a cashmere sweater I'd given him last Christmas, and walked into the party like he was a guest. "Smells incredible," he said, pouring himself a drink. "That's usually the goal on Christmas Eve," I said. He didn't catch the tone. He never did anymore. We sat down to dinner at 6:30. The table looked genuinely beautiful. Lorraine's heirloom candlesticks, the navy linen I'd pressed that morning, the pine and whiteberry centerpiece I'd assembled from the farmer's market. The prime rib was, objectively, perfect, pink and even, the crust exactly right. Lorraine said it's better than last year, which from her was an ovation. I thought, there won't be a next year. It was the same thought I'd had for months, surfacing and sinking, surfacing again. The feeling of a conclusion approaching. The dinner moved the way those dinners always moved. Nate and Landon talked about their father's old boat. Kendall's youngest threw a dinner roll. Raymond had 2 whiskeys and looked at the middle distance. Lorraine made a comment about my hair, framed as concern. Then Landon set down his fork. He picked up his wine glass. He tapped it once with his knife. Ting. The table quieted. I felt it before I understood it. A cold drop somewhere in my chest. I looked at him across the candlesticks and the pine centerpiece and the beautiful meal I had spent 3 days making. And I knew, in the specific, humiliating way that wives know things they've been trying not to know for a very long time. I want to say something, he said. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the table, at his parents, at the general space of family assembled. I know this is hard timing. But I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I don't think it gets easier to say. I heard Kendall inhale. Landon, I said. My voice was quiet, a warning or a question, I wasn't sure which. He looked at me then. His eyes were resolved. Not sad, not guilty. Resolved, the way someone looks when they've practiced a speech enough times that the emotion has been rehearsed out of it. Our marriage isn't working, he said. I'm not happy. I haven't been for a while, and I think we both know that. The room was absolutely still. Kendall's youngest had stopped fidgeting. The uncle had set down his drink. I had my attorney draw something up. He reached inside his blazer, which was hanging on the back of his chair, and pulled out a long white envelope. He set it on the table beside my plate, between the prime rib and the Christmas rolls I had made from my grandmother's recipe. Mrs. Landon Whitfield. That was my name on the envelope, soon to be no one's name at all. You can have the condo through January, he said. Then we'll need to list it. The terms are fair. My attorney will reach out tomorrow. I looked at the envelope. I looked at the room. Raymond was staring at his plate. Lorraine had a very specific expression on her face. Not surprise, not quite. More like the careful neutrality of someone who already knew the verdict and was waiting for the sentencing. She knew. She had known before tonight. Maybe she had helped plan tonight. Nate's girlfriend was looking at her lap. Kendall's husband was looking at the wall. And Kendall herself was looking at me with something I can only describe as rehearsed pity. The kind that has a tidy edge, like it's bits ironed. Oh, Landon, she said softly to him, not to me. You've been so strong about this. That was the sentence that did it. Not the divorce papers, not the audience, not the ruined dinner. Kendall saying you've been so strong, as if announcing it to his family at a Christmas table, while I was still in the kitchen apron was an act of courage. I put my napkin on the table. I stood up, slowly, deliberately, the way you move when you are the only calm person in a room, and you want everyone to understand that. I walked to the kitchen. I picked up the apron I had draped over the oven handle. I untied it, folded it once, the way I had been trained to fold things neatly, efficiently, without making a scene. Then I looked at Lorraine. She was watching me with the expression of someone who has poked something and is waiting to see if it bites. Lorraine, I said. The room had followed me with their eyes. I've really valued your guidance over the years, all the recipe notes, the helpful suggestions. I set the apron on the counter with both hands, flat, precise. You'll finally get the daughter-in-law who does it exactly the way you want. I hope she enjoys cooking for 11 people on 3 days' notice. I picked up my purse from the hall hook. The prime rib rests for 20 minutes before you carve it, I said to the room. To no one, to all of them. Don't let Nate rush it. And I walked out. The elevator was immediate, which felt like grace. The doors closed and the lobby mirror showed me a woman I barely recognized. Coat half on, jaw set, eyes very bright and very dry. My hands were not shaking. That surprised me. That surprised me more than any of what had just happened. I called my best friend from the sidewalk. She picked up on the second ring. Tell me you're okay, she said, because she could hear it in my first breath. He did it at the dinner table, I said. in front of his whole family, with the food still on the plates. A pause, then very quietly, "That man is a coward. I need somewhere to be tonight. You need to be here. I'm opening wine right now. How far are you?" Paloma lived 12 minutes away by rideshare. I spent those 12 minutes watching Seattle pass in the dark, the Christmas lights on the houses, the wet streets reflecting everything back twice. I thought about the prime rib. I thought about the rolls. I thought, with a strange detached humor, that no one was going to remember to let it rest 20 minutes. Then I thought about the envelope. I hadn't opened it. I'd left it on the table, beside my uneaten plate. My name on it. Terms I was supposed to accept by tomorrow when his attorney called, before I had time to think. Paloma met me at her door in socks and a sweatshirt, took one look at my face, and pulled me in without a word. She poured the wine, good wine, a Willamette Valley Pinot Noir she'd been saving, and we sat on her couch while her cat climbed onto my lap and settled there like a warm, indifferent anchor. "You need a lawyer," she said before I even finished telling her. "Tonight, not tomorrow. It's Christmas Eve. I know exactly what night it is." She was already reaching for her phone. "My cousin's firm handles family law. She's probably at her parents' tonight, but she will answer for this." She was right. Paloma's cousin, a sharp, no-nonsense attorney named Donovan, picked up on the fourth ring, listened to a 60-second summary, and said with audible steel, "Don't sign anything, don't open the envelope, don't talk to his attorney, and tomorrow morning, first thing, I need you back at that apartment before anything else moves." Why? Because he's already told you he's listing it. Which means the clock is running on what else might walk out the door with him. You need to document everything. Get there early, before he expects it. I looked at Paloma. She was already nodding. We went that night. The key still worked. That was the first thing. The second thing was the silence. The apartment I had lived in for 5 years, that I had furnished and arranged and cleaned and maintained, suddenly felt like a stage set after the cast had gone home. There were gaps. The mid-century console in the entryway, the one with the geometric inlaid top, was gone. The bookshelf in the study had a long, empty section where his first editions had been. The Eames chair in the corner, gone. I moved through the rooms taking pictures the way Donovan had told me to. Every room, before I touched anything. My jewelry box was on the dresser. But it was the wrong jewelry box. The small cedar one my mother had given me, the one with the painted flowers on the lid, had been replaced with a cheap black velvet box I had never seen before. I opened it. My pearl studs, a silver bangle from college. My grandmother's thin gold ring with the tiny emerald chip. My grandmother's gold and diamond bar necklace. The one she left me specifically in her will, the one I wore to my own wedding, was not there. My passport was not in the fireproof box in the study. The folder with my grandmother's estate documents was gone. The folder with the deed to her condo in Portland. The studio apartment she'd left me, free and clear, that Landon had been asking me to fold into a joint account for the past 2 years, for simplicity's sake, was gone. He'd been sloppy, though, or in a hurry. The secondary lockbox, the small one I kept behind the false panel in the bottom drawer of the bureau, the one I'd put there after a break-in scare 3 years ago and never mentioned to anyone, including Landon, was untouched. My grandmother's will, the deed, the property transfer documents that had never been signed, all there. I held those documents against my chest in the dark study and breathed. Then I saw the recycling bin. It was overflowing with shredded paper, which was unusual. We had a shredder in the office, but Landon almost never used it. I knelt down. I spread a garbage bag on the floor the way Paloma had started to do without being asked, and we pieced the shreds together like an ugly puzzle. It was financial. Numbers in red, column headers I recognized because I had done the household bookkeeping for 5 years. But these weren't household accounts. These were business accounts. Landon's architecture firm, Whitfield Studio, which he and his father had founded 12 years ago, and which had been expanding aggressively for the last 3. Expanding aggressively. That was the phrase I had used cheerfully at dinner parties. I said it like it was a compliment. One larger fragment had survived the shredder mostly intact, a printed email from his father Raymond. The subject line was 3 words. "We are underwater." I smoothed it on the floor and read it. The renovation financing on the Portland Street project fell through. The bank called the bridge loan. "We have until the 15th to show liquidity, or we're looking at receivership." The Portland property, the one on Belmont, is the only unencumbered asset with enough value to secure anything. The appraisal came in at $340,000. That buys us the line of credit we need. "Landon, you need to move this forward. The title can't transfer if she's still on it. Handle your end. The board meets January 3rd. The Portland property. My grandmother's studio, on Belmont Avenue, in my name inherited free and clear with no Landon on the deed. The property he'd been asking me to fold into a joint account for simplicity's sake. I sat back on my heels, the pieces of the email spread around me in the dark, and felt the specific sensation of a story rewriting itself around me, not a marriage falling apart, a liquidation. I was the asset that needed to be processed before a deadline. The Christmas Eve dinner, the envelope, the rehearsed speech, none of it was about unhappiness. It was about the January 3rd board meeting. "He needed you to sign something fast," Paloma said, reading over my shoulder. Her voice was very quiet. "Before you had time to think." "Before I got a lawyer," I said. I photographed every piece of that email. I photographed the gaps on the shelves, the wrong jewelry box, the empty passport drawer. Then I took the documents from the lockbox, put them in my bag, and called Donovan back from the hallway. "I found it," I said, "the real reason." She listened. When I finished, she said, "You file first thing tomorrow. We file the divorce petition before his attorney opens their office. We file a motion to freeze the marital assets, including any property you hold separately. And we file a temporary injunction against transfer of the Portland property." A pause. "He cannot touch that condo, not legally, not once we're on record." We filed at 8:52 in the morning on December 26th. Donovan had worked through Christmas night to have it ready. His attorney called at 9:15. He was smooth. The way expensive attorneys are smooth, like a river stone, worn down until nothing catches on it. He said the terms were generous. He said a simpler resolution would save us both time and money. He said Landon was willing to let me keep a portion of the household investment account if I signed quickly and dropped any claims to his business interests. "He's not offering that out of generosity," Donovan said, after I'd patched her in on speaker. "He's offering it because the Portland property is worth more than the investment account, and he's hoping you don't know what you're sitting on." "She knows exactly what she's sitting on," I said. There was a pause. Then, "I'll advise my client of your position." He hung up in under a minute. Donovan said, "He's scared." There was something like satisfaction in her voice. "Good, let him be." The temporary hearing was 11 days later. I wore a gray blazer I'd bought with my own money before I ever met Landon. Donovan stood up in that courtroom and laid it out simply, without drama, the way truth often works best. I had left a career at my husband's explicit, documented request. I had managed the household finances, the investment accounts, the vendor relationships, the client entertaining that had brought 2 of Whitfield Studios' largest accounts through my personal network, and I had never received acknowledgement or compensation for any of it. The document he'd served me with was not a fair settlement. It was an asset extraction, timed to a business crisis I had not been informed about. His attorney called it bitter overreach. The judge called it credible and ordered exclusive use of the condo, temporary support of $8,000 a month, return of my passport within 48 hours, and return of the diamond bar necklace and any other personally inherited jewelry within 5 business days. Landon looked at me when the ruling was read. I looked back. I felt nothing except the specific cold calm of having been right about something terrible and having the paperwork to prove it. He caught me in the hall after. His attorney was still packing up. "You're making this so much harder than it has to be," he said, low, almost under his breath. "I'm making it accurate," I said. "That's different. The Portland property is irrelevant to any of this." My attorney has your father's email, I said. Take however long you need to decide what irrelevant means. I walked out into the January rain. Donovan fell into step beside me. I was scrolling through job postings that evening. 3-year gaps are not easy to explain, and I knew that. When my phone rang with an 206 area code I recognized but hadn't seen in a while. My former director of client services. She'd been promoted since I left. I heard you're back on the market, she said, without preamble. Professionally, yes. Recently and somewhat involuntarily. Then I have something for you. The Alderton Group account. Do you remember them? The sustainable packaging company that was coming up when you left? I remembered. A mid-size company trying to break into enterprise retail. Good mission, complicated stakeholders. They're live now. Nationwide rollout starting February. The strategy lead we had just accepted a position in London. We're 2 weeks out from the client kickoff presentation and we have no one who can actually walk into that room and own it. I thought of you immediately. A pause. I know it's been a while. I know the timing is chaotic. But you're the best person I know at walking into a room that's already on fire and making the fire useful. I laughed, an actual laugh, short and sharp. What's the title? Project Director. Direct report to me. Signing bonus to bridge the gap. We can talk numbers tomorrow, but they're real numbers. I took it. Of course I took it. The Alderton kickoff was 8 days later. I spent most of those 8 days in depositions or on calls with Donovan, but I carved out 6 the night before and rebuilt the entire presentation from scratch. Not what they'd been planning to say. What they should say. About why their product wasn't just sustainable packaging. It was brand story infrastructure for companies that were tired of greenwashing and wanted to prove something real. The client was skeptical for the first 7 minutes. I watched the skepticism shift. I know that feeling. I built my career on it. The moment a room stops waiting for you to be wrong and starts thinking you might be right. By the end of the hour, their CEO was leaning forward with both elbows on the conference table. That's the angle, she said. Why didn't our last 3 agencies say that? They were selling what they knew, I said. I'm selling what you need. She laughed. My director gave me a look across the table that said, there she is. There she was. I was in my car after, still in the parking garage, letting the engine warm up, when a text came through from a number I didn't recognize. It was short. We need to talk, Landon, tonight. Then, a few seconds later, another one from his sister Kendall. Please call me. It's bad. I found out later, from Donovan, who found out from the financial discovery process, which had been subpoenaing Whitfield studio records for 6 weeks. The Portland Street renovation project, the one the bridge loan had been meant to cover, had lost its anchor tenant. The retail chain backing the ground floor had pulled out in November. Landon had known in November. He hadn't told his investors, his board, or the bank. That was a problem that had a name, legally, and it wasn't a comfortable name. The SEC referral came in February. The receivership filing for Whitfield Studio came in March. And the woman Landon had been seeing. The one I'd heard about through the discovery depositions. The one who had, apparently, been part of the plan to keep me distracted and off balance during the divorce proceedings. Had stopped returning his calls sometime in January. Nobody knew where she'd gone. Donovan found it professionally interesting. I found it privately satisfying. The trial was in April. I won't walk through all of it. I'll say that Donovan was methodical and exact, and exactly as relentless as I had needed her to be. I'll say that Raymond, on the stand, admitted that the Portland property had been discussed as collateral in business meetings before Landon had filed any divorce paperwork. I'll say that the judge, a woman in her 50s with an expression that suggested she had seen this exact movie before and was no longer impressed by it, awarded me the Portland condo outright, 50% of the marital assets, and spousal support for 8 years. She also required Landon to pay my legal fees in full. The look on his face when that last part was read, I won't pretend I didn't feel something. I did, not triumph. Something quieter and more complicated. Relief, maybe. The relief of a door finally, properly, closing. He found me in the hall afterward. He looked thinner than I remembered, which in 4 months is something. I thought he started and then stopped. I know what you thought, I said. You thought I'd sign whatever you put in front of me because that's what I'd been doing for 3 years. You miscalculated. He didn't say anything else. His attorney steered him away. 8 months later. A Friday night in November, Paloma's apartment, which has become a kind of home base for my chosen life. The one I'm building from scratch. The way you build things when you finally get to choose the materials yourself. We were 3 people around her kitchen table. Me, Paloma, and Donovan, who has become a friend somewhere along the way between depositions and bad courthouse coffee. There was a good bottle of Oregon Pinot, takeout from the Thai place on the corner, and Paloma's cat wedged between me and my chair like a furry parentheses. My phone had been ringing, off and on, since 5 o'clock. Kendall, Raymond. A number I didn't recognize with a Portland area code. I'd silenced it and put it face down and let it ring. But after dinner, Paloma picked it up, looked at the screen and said, "There's a voicemail, from Lorraine." I looked at her. She looked back at me, steady. I picked up the phone, I played it. Lorraine's voice was slower than I remembered. The precision was still there. She had always been precise, but something underneath it was different. Tired, maybe. Or just old. "This is Lorraine," she said, as if I might have forgotten. "I'm calling because I think I owe you a conversation I should have initiated a long time ago. I won't pretend I didn't know what Landon was doing this past year. I won't pretend I didn't encourage him to simplify things before the board meeting. I told myself it was pragmatic. I told myself you were resilient. A pause, a long one. I was unkind to you, consistently. I thought your softness was weakness. I see now I mistook where you kept your strength." Another pause. "I don't expect anything from this call. I wanted to say, Raymond sends his regards. We're in Scottsdale now. The weather is better for his heart." And then, almost as an afterthought, "You made a very good prime rib." The voicemail ended. Paloma was watching me. Donovan was watching me. "She apologized," I said. I wasn't sure why I said it out loud. To make it real, maybe. "Sort of," Paloma said gently. "For her, that's the whole speech," I said. And I found, to my own surprise, that it was enough. Not because it fixed anything. There's no fixing 3 years of being made to feel like an intruder in my own kitchen, in my own marriage, in my own life. But it was a closing, a door fully shut, and I was on the right side of it. I set the phone down and picked up my wine glass. "Okay," Paloma said. "Toast?" "I'll do it," Donovan said, which surprised us both. She raised her glass. "To the women who stay too long and leave too slow, and then, when they finally go, leave so completely there's nothing left to take back." "That's either the best or the worst toast I've ever heard," Paloma said. "Both," I said. "It's both." We clinked glasses. The cat knocked a fortune cookie off the table and batted it under the refrigerator. Paloma swore under her breath and went to retrieve it. Donovan refilled the wine. I looked out the window at the city at night. The specific way Seattle looks in November, all wet light and reflection, the Space Needle in the distance, doing what it always does, just standing there being itself in the dark. I had a meeting Monday morning with a client who wanted to overhaul their entire brand identity from scratch. I had a condo in Portland that I was going to visit next weekend for the first time since I'd inherited it, and decided what it might become. I had a Saturday morning run with Paloma, who had recently taken up running with the same chaotic enthusiasms she brought to everything, and who had already signed us up for a 10K in March. I had a life, a specific, imperfect, genuinely mine life, with a lease on it that nobody else held. Some nights I still catch myself calculating what something will cost Landon before I remember. I don't have to do that anymore. The accounting isn't mine. I get to just buy the wine. The prime rib recipe, for the record, is still my grandmother's. I made it last month for nobody but myself, with the good mustard crust and the horseradish cream on the side. And I ate it at the kitchen counter in my own apartment in my pajamas with the radio on, and it was the best meal I have had in years. I am learning slowly that cooking for yourself counts. That taking care of yourself counts. that showing up for the people who actually stay is the only table worth setting. And I am learning. This one is harder. This one takes more time. That leaving when it is finally the right thing is not a loss. It is a door. And sometimes what is on the other side of it is the whole rest of your life, waiting with the lights on.